Welcome everyone. I am so excited you're all here tonight. My name is Melissa Haas. I'm the Director of Development and Programming here at the Southwest Harbor Public Library. And I am going to give you just a couple of housekeeping items before we get going. For those of you here in our studio audience, if you need the restroom, you're going to head back down the hallway and you'll find me in the children's room across the circulation desk in the restroom. If you could please take a moment to make sure that your cell phones are on silent so we don't disturb our presenter or our neighbors. And I'd also like to draw to your attention a couple of programs we have coming up in the next few weeks. The first exciting thing is pending mail delivery and everything. We will hopefully starting next week have some eclipse glasses for everybody. The deal is you come, say hello, check out a book, and get some eclipse glasses. You're going to be protected on the day of April. We also have Your Safety Matters coming up on April 16th with Fire Chief Tom Chisholm. We're going to have a tea on Thursday, April 18th at 2 in this very room. And then to round out April, we have Images of Acadia, a program with some unseen images by Ann Kozak on April 23rd, and a poetry reading with Paul Weiss and Crow Suncloud on April 30th. All of those right here in this very room. Now, on to our main event. After the presentation tonight, there will be time for some question and answers. For those of you joining us digitally, you can pop those right into the chat, and our Director of Technology and Communications, Kate Pickup, will help facilitate those being asked. So, a native of Scotland, Jane Ross Potter divides her time between here on MDI and Scotland. Her fiction writing is inspired by those travels to England and Scotland, including the beautiful Scottish Islands. In addition to the Glass Trilogy, which she's going to be talking about tonight, she has a number of different novels and short stories, and they are all amazingly well reviewed, and she's achieved a number of Indie Excellence Awards. And her other trilogy is the Bus Trilogy. And then the Glass Trilogy culminates with It Ended with a Wedding. And in addition to reading excerpts from the book tonight, she's going to show us some slides of the beautiful Orkney and Shetland Islands, which she was able to visit, and she spent some time living there in 2019. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Jane Ross Potter.
Well, thank you very much. I've never spoken with a microphone attached to me before, so it sounds a little weird to me. So apologies if I sound strange to you. I'm just getting used to it. So for the people here, I brought some people here in person. I brought some sort of background information, a couple of articles that are on the table. One on collecting cowries in Scotland, and the other is on birding in Scotland. So I'll hand those out afterwards if you're interested. So It Ended with a Wedding is the third book in what I call the Glass Trilogy. It began with The Marbles, which is a book set in a fictional Scottish town that's based on the real town of Seaham in England, which is famous for its multicolored sea glass. Mm-hmm. And the second book in the trilogy begins, actually I shouldn't really say, because if people haven't read it yet, I won't tell you how it starts, but it kind of continues the theme. The plot of It Ended with the Wedding brings to the close a mystery that began, and it began with the marbles, that has to do with a glass factory in this fictional town that was almost destroyed during World War II. And people are still trying to figure out what really happened. So there are three plot lines in It Ended with the Wedding. One of them is to finally bring to a close what happened during World War II. The second one is the romance between two characters, Alistair and Margaret. And do they actually get married in the end? That's, we'll leave that open. And then the third plot line that's new to this book and brings in new characters is a death that occurs at a law firm in Portland, Maine. And the characters who are in Scotland already get pulled into investigating it. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So the next slide. So it began with the marbles and it continued with the Cowries. Now, some of the characters in this more recent trilogy, the Sea Glass Trilogy, were first introduced in the Bursey Trilogy. Margaret's mentor has a theme of two characters who are aficionados of Dr. Samuel Johnson. And so there's kind of a running theme of quotes from Samuel Johnson and how those relate to the action in the book. And then the symbol stones, Martin and Alistair meet and this romance begins. And then the third book in this trilogy, The Secret of Finlay Village, I get to indulge one of my interests, which is hidden hoards of treasure in Scotland. And yeah, so the Sea Glass Trilogy can be read completely independently, but it does build on the characters from the first trilogy. So now let's move on to the location of Scotland. I'm going to be mainly, like I said, mainly talking about Orkney and Shetland. And in most maps, you can't really tell where they are because they're just these little insets, if you could see on the left-hand map. Well, I'm going to get to that. Yeah, in the left-hand map, they're just sort of somewhere out there in the ocean. And the right-hand map, you can see that Orkney is just north of the most northeast coast of Scotland. It's an hour away on the ferry, to give you an idea. Okay, so Orkney and Shetland are both off the northeast coast of Scotland. Now, just to go over again, the main characters, there's Margaret, who's a junior attorney at a law firm in Portland, Maine, but she's ended up spending several months in Scotland after she inherited a house. And she's Scottish. And then Alistair is her fiance. He's a private investigator from Portland, but he's also in Scotland. And he and Margaret meet up and they fall in love and get engaged. But then Margaret's ex-boyfriend from the first book of the first trilogy, who had dumped her and gone back to France, he shows up in Scotland and he's kind of a challenge to Alistair. Alistair's jealous. Margaret is beginning to wonder if she really should be with Alistair, should she be with Henri? And it doesn't help that Margaret's mother really prefers Henri, but we'll get into that. And then another main character is Hamish. He's been a character from the very beginning of the first trilogy. He's one of the two people who's very interested in Samuel Johnson, and he and Margaret kind of bonded over that. Yes. No. No. So since this is a book reading, I'm going to move to the first short reading, and I'm going to set the scene. So I like writing about tidal islands because it provides a bit of drama, conditions that you can't really control. So in this left-hand slide, this is actually in Orkney. But for people who are familiar with Bar Island in Bar Harbor, obviously, which is actually mentioned in the book. So at the very front of the slide, if you can imagine, that's Bar Island. That is the tidal island. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of the causeway, that's the mainland or another island. And the tide's coming in. So right now this is walkable, but for this scene, if you can imagine, there's maybe a few inches of water over it. So Margaret has walked over to this island to take some photographs. Henri is on the safe side, on the other side, but Margaret has not come back when she was supposed to. And Alistair shows up with his private investigator friend, Adam. And by now, Alistair's practically hysterical, knowing that Margaret's gone off to this island with her ex-boyfriend. So I hope this doesn't take long. It should be a kind of a short section, but it kind of sets the tone for how Henri and Alistair are going to be interacting throughout the book. So Alistair and Adam, and if you can imagine, Adam has a very strong Scottish accent. I'm not going to pretend to do it. So Henri's car was parked outside the hotel, the hood cold to the touch, so they hadn't even tried to go to the ferry. Calm yourself, Alistair, Adam urged, not for the first time. Alistair sighed deeply. What other explanation can there be? He turned at the sound of loud clunking as someone came running down the stairs from the bedrooms. Alistair, cried a man's voice, a French man's voice. Mon Dieu, thank goodness you are here. We need to rescue Margaret. What's happened to her? Alistair demanded, facing Henri. Tell me, where is she? Henri nervously took a few steps away. All we know is she went to the little island out there hours ago. She said she would be back by 10:30, but no, she does not come back. You let her go alone? Alistair stepped forward to confront Henri. Oui, but Margaret, she is very insistent, n'est-ce pas? She wanted to take photographs, that is all she tells me. I couldn't go right away because of my shoes, but now I have some to borrow, so I'm going over. He pointed down, and Alistair could see that Henri was wearing a pair of well-worn hiking boots, quite a contrast to the loafers he usually wore. The three men hurried to the Alistair, Adam, and Henri hurried to the dining room window and looked toward the tidal island. So if you can imagine looking this way in that photograph on the left. We're too late, Adam said. He pointed. The tide chart at the front desk says safe crossing ended half an hour ago, and you can see the causeway will be covered any minute. We can still go across in shallow water, no? Henry asked, poised to get going. Wait, came a man's voice from behind them. Sorry, I'm the manager. I just got to the hotel and I learned about Margaret. I gave Henri those boots to wear, but even if they protect his feet, the causeway is slick with seaweed, and if he falls, the current could drag him away. Alistair turned to face the manager. How can we get out there before the next low tide? There's a wee boat down on the shore attached by ropes to both ends of the causeway. But if you go over in it, you'll have to stay on the other side for a few hours until the next low tide. It's risky to use the boat when the tide is high. Alistair and Adam ran to Adam's van and changed into hiking boots, at the same time grabbing various pieces of emergency equipment. A first aid kit, a length of rope, a splint in case of a broken arm or leg. They grabbed their coffee flasks. Inside, Adam took the flasks to the kitchen and asked for them to be filled with coffee. So then there's a bit of a long scene where the manager of the hotel is preparing, packs of food for them to take over. And then, yes, if they take the little boat over, they're going to get stranded because the boat's too weak to come back in the, the high tide. So while they're doing that, Henri just goes plunging along and he crosses over to the island on his own. And then Alistair and Adam try to go over in the boat. Turns out that the boat's leaking. Alistair starts raging that Henri has sabotaged the boat because he wants to be with Margaret. So eventually the manager comes back and says, I'm so sorry, I'll try to find another boat. So Henri's on the other side with no supplies, no first aid kit, no food, no nothing, but he's going to go look for Margaret. And Adam and Alistair sit down to wait, see if the manager finds a boat, see if Margaret comes back. And then I'll just finish reading it. Adam muttered something to himself and let out a groan. What was that? Alistair asked. More loudly, Adam declared, how often is happiness destroyed by preparation, foolish preparation? Alistair stared at him like he was losing the plot. Are you complaining about me bringing emergency equipment? Because if you are, sorry, pal, no, I'm quoting Jane Austen. Something about seizing pleasure and not spending too much time preparing. And in this case, I have to say she's right. Henri did no preparation, he just seized. Adam stopped, realizing what he was implying. Well, he may have seized the moment, Alistair said, but he's not prepared for anything he might find over there if Margaret is injured. So I stand by my approach. He sighed and got his binoculars out, ready for a long wait. So Alistair and Henri are at odds already. eventually Margaret and Alistair may or may not get married. And if they do get married, they're going to go on a honeymoon. And oh, did something happen?
Yeah.
Oh. No, it's just my face suddenly popped up. I don't know what it's doing. Should I keep going?
How often is having this spread by transportation?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so assuming that they go on their honeymoon to Orkney, I'll move. I'm afraid I'm going too slowly. We'll move on to Orkney. So, okay. It's not advancing. Is it me?
Nope, it's not.
Okay. Okay. Okay, perfect. So the Orkney Islands up north of Scotland, there's a few locations now, since I can't really, my pointer really doesn't reach, but I will point you towards 3 locations. The Old Man of Hoy on the far bottom left, that is actually a sea stack that I'll be talking about. Kirkwall is the capital. And then sort of to the left, there's the Ring of Brodgar, Maeshowe, and Stennis. Yeah, which stones of Stennis. Oh, and now at the bottom right, now you see Orkneys and Shetlands in relation to each other. So now to get to Orkney, there are several ways. There are a number of different ferries. Some of them are car ferries, some of them are overnight, some are day trips. This just gives you an idea of all the different ways to get there from the north coast of Scotland or from Aberdeen, which is the overnight car ferry. But it goes through the North Sea and it's prone to really bad weather. So, and you can do it, even though it's far beyond the North Coast, you can do it as a day trip from Inverness, but I wouldn't advise it because you get so little time at the various locations. So this is just a picture of one of the foot ferries. Well, you can walk on or drive on to that ferry. And then I included a picture of the plane because this may be the last tartan you see while you're up there. It doesn't feel like the rest of Scotland at all, you know, because it's got it's got a different background that I'll talk about. So enjoy your view of the tartan on the plane. And then there are 3 terms that we use a lot for Orkney and the first one also for Shetland, and that's a broch, B-R-O-C-H. And it's a circular stone building, not so much Neolithic because they weren't that old, just a bit over 2,000 years ago. The chambered cairns are Neolithic. Some are, you know, over 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. There's many of them in Orkney that you can easily just go into them, and there are no bodies there anymore, but they've been cleared out. But some of them you have to crawl through a long dark tunnel to get in. Others are more open and you can walk into them. And then when I get into talking about the war history, Scapa Flow, that some of you may have heard of, it's a large, I'll have maps of that. It's a large bay that's sheltered right in the middle of mainland Orkney, and it played a major role in World War I and World War II. And any trip to Orkney, you probably will go to Kirkwall and visit the St. Magnus Cathedral, which is quite magnificent. Most people will go in, look on the ground floor, and figure they've seen it. I highly advise taking the tour where you go up these incredibly narrow spiral staircases. And for people who've been in spiral staircases in Britain, I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring you all over there. you know, you tend to just go in the spiral staircase, go up and go down again. Whereas in this building, they're all networked. So you can like come to this little, sorry, let me move ahead. Like here, and you kind of, you know, you're stepping out into the abyss to try and get back down again. So, but it's worth it. It's worth it to go all the way to the roof. And hopefully not in the church. I think it was more for monks getting around. And it's worth going all the way up to the clock tower because you get a view down into the main road of the main shopping street in Kirkwall. And then I thought this was kind of interesting. Oh, and I'm going to pass it around. You go up to the clock tower of that church, the cathedral. That's got more photos in it. This was kind of interesting. You know, you think of, you know, when you're investigating these outer islands, you kind of think of new ideas and concepts sort of starting in the big cities, you know, London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, and then moving out. And I was interested to learn that there was a bishop at this cathedral up in Orkney who actually left a bequest to found a college in Edinburgh that became Edinburgh University. So it's sort of an example of, you know, a very remote area having a major impact on a major city. Now, if you like hiking, Scotland has a lot of these sort of marked paths, multi-day hikes, and Orkney has one called the St. Magnus Way that celebrates St. Magnus and his legacy. He was martyred, you know, like 1,000 years ago, but he's the patron saint of Orkney. He was a Viking, but he didn't want to fight. He supposedly stood on the deck of the boat, refused to fight, said, "I have no argument with any man here. I'm not taking up my sword." And he eventually was sainted after he was killed. So the St. Magnus Way route starts on a little island called Egglesay. So you have to take a ferry out there, like I'll show you quickly a ferry like this. No. So you go out there, visit a few sites associated with him, including, you know, where he was martyred, and then back onto the mainland of Orkney, and just pass through different locations that had an important role in his life. And you wind up at the end, as you'd expect, in Kirkwall, at the cathedral, well, the site of the cathedral.
There's numbers, but there's distances.
You know, something, it's so small on my screen here. I'm afraid I can't. I think it's probably locations. Yeah, because I think this would have come out of a booklet about it. And then, sure. I need help with anything else. So if you do any part of the walk, now I did this in 2019, so I can't be sure, but if you do, when I did part of the walk and then I went to the cathedral and I said, I've done some of the walk, and they gave me this lovely shell with a little sticker of the St. Magnus Way. Anyway, I love little souvenirs like that. I think they're kind of fun. So, and I worked this into the first of the Glass Trilogy books because I thought it was such a neat thing. So yeah, so if you go to Orkney and you want to do some walking, that would be, no, I was on my own, and it's so remote. I began thinking if something happened to me. Yeah. So yeah, so this ferry happens to be the one going over to Rousey, where it's actually sometimes called the Egypt of the North, but it does have a lot of tombs and things that you can visit. And then another place that just about everybody visits in Orkney is the Italian Chapel, which was built during World War II by Italian prisoners of war. So I could booklet it in a minute. And I apologize to people on Zoom that I'm passing out booklets for people to look at, but that's the best I can do. So the Italian chapel was constructed from 2 Nissen huts, but what's amazing is the decoration inside, you know, done, and this was during the war. So most of the fixtures are just things that have been scavenged and reused. A lot of kind of Trompe l'oeil sort of painting to give the impression of marble and brick and stonework and things. And there's such good feeling between people of Orkney and the descendants of the men who built and decorated this, that they continue to have commemorations and, you know, come back and visit. So it's well worth seeing if you're there. And all around the island, there's evidence of, you know, wartime buildings and, you know, defensive structures and things. So I was going to talk about Scapa Flow a little bit more. That you can see it there right in the middle. And it looks like it should be a very well protected natural harbor. And during, at the beginning of World War II, there was a sense that the British Navy boats that were in there were pretty well protected. And the Navy had already taken quite a few ships that they, sorry, I get caught up in my notes. They called them block ships that they sank, particularly in this lower right-hand side. Though where a ship or a submarine could theoretically sneak in from the east and get into Scapa Flow and do a lot of damage. And very, very tragically, in May of 1939, there was a battleship called the Royal Oak that was in Scapa Flow with over 800 crew, and a German U-boat snuck through the barriers and torpedoed it several times. The first time they torpedoed it, the people on the ship thought it was an internal explosion because they were so, apparently so confident that no German ships could get in. And at this time, Churchill had already ordered that the barriers be built between those various islands, and they're called the Churchill barriers. So they kind of sped up the building. Now, this was taken when I flew in one time. I hope you can see between the island on the right and the middle island, there's what looks like a causeway here. Yeah. So that is one of the Churchill barriers. And then there's another one. And in addition to providing a physical barrier for boats, it's meant that you can do these day tours up to Orkney because it's connected those islands that then are this closest to mainland Scotland for the ferries to come in. So, I mean, it's, for people who live here, imagine the difference between not having the causeway from the mainland onto Mount Desert Island. So that's what these have done. Although now huge tour buses have to go over them, so you kind of wonder, they were not built for that. And the other major piece of history about Scapa Flow that's sort of everywhere in evidence there is in 1919, there was something like 74 ships of the captured German fleet were there. And the Germans scuttled them all in one day. They planned it out in advance. And no, so that the ships wouldn't be used by the British and the French to attack Germany after the war. And so this picture I'm showing you, I think that was on a hotel room wall or something. And it's now a major dive site. So, but what's interesting is it's almost not making fun of it, but it's treated kind of lightly, I think. So there's a t-shirt in Stromness, that town that I showed that's on the west side of Scapa Flow. And then, how do they do it, Jay? Well, apparently, I mean, I don't know technically, but whatever things there are, whatever structures are in the hold that prevents water from coming in, they went around and loosened them all. And so they basically all sank over a course of 5 hours or something. Yeah. And all the sailors, there were over 1,000 of them, maybe even close to 2,000. The German sailors all had to swim to safety. And of course they were taken as prisoners. Yeah. Yeah. And then this, I was amazed to see this at a local pub. Yeah. So they're still kind of making fun of it. And then like I was saying earlier, Orkney seems so remote, but here in Stromness, there's a a well that was used by the Hudson Bay Company. It was used by Captain Cook, and it was used by John Franklin for an Arctic exploration. So even though it's very far north, it was on a major route for ships doing the exploration and commerce and things. Let's see, how are we doing? Yeah. Yeah, who knows how good the water was, but maybe they ran out. And one other thing from Stromness, I mentioned the Old Man of Foy earlier. So you can take a short ferry trip from Stromness over to the island of Foy, and there's just beautiful hiking there. And people climb this. People do climb it. And right before the beginning of the, let's see, where did it go? Right at the beginning of the walk, I didn't get a chance to put this in the slide. So there's a sign that says, Old Man of Foy. Climbers are hereby warned that there is neither suitable rescue equipment nor experienced rock climbers in the vicinity. Climbers therefore proceed at their own risk. And people do climb it, but it's a beautiful day hike to do that if you find yourself in Stromness. So we've done Scapa Flow. And then I know I'm jumping around with history, but that's exactly what happens when you're in Orkney, is you can be in present day in one place. And then this is Maze Howe, which is one of the chambered cairns that I mentioned. This is one you can only go in with a tour. You can't just, most of them you can just go in on your own. This one you have to be with a tour.
These are burial sites?
Yeah, these are burial sites. Yeah. I don't think we really know. I mean, it's thousands of years. And there's a visitor center. This particular one is aligned so that I think on June 21st or the summer solstice, the light shines directly into the very back. And then the nearby is the Ring of Brodgar, which is spectacular. And the big difference between like going to Stonehenge and going to these places is that you can walk right up to the rocks and touch them and experience them at all hours of the day. So I'm going to do another quick reading. I was going to do 3 readings altogether. So I'll stop here and do a quick reading. Oh, so this is the Stones of Stennis. So this is me touching one, but you're allowed to. So I'll leave that on and do a quick. Okay, I think I can read it. I lost my glasses. I'm sorry. No, it's okay. I can read it without them. I can actually. So Alice, so we're in the little town of Kilvelly, which is the town where I don't know what's happened to them. The town where the glass factory was. Alistair has spent a very difficult morning talking about someone who's passed away. And then he meets Margaret, who spent the morning planning the wedding and talking to a baker about the cake. So they sit down to have lunch. Margaret says, I have lots to tell you about the wedding plans. And Alistair goes, wedding plans? In all the drama of the day, Alistair had sort of forgotten he was getting married. Panic hadn't set in yet, but he was starting to worry that it would. And now I'm afraid this is a little bit of a teaser for a much earlier book called, what's it called? Seeking the Medicine Buddha, where Alistair makes his first appearance. But anyway, he never forgot the shameful relief he felt when he boarded that plane in the Himalayas, leaving Paula behind. They'd been happy, settled in their cottage, surrounded by natural beauty, but it had been her world, her work that kept them there. Now he worried that he'd repeated history, fallen for a woman far from home, cozy in a cottage, surrounded by natural beauty. Was this it? Was this to be his future? But he had to stifle any doubts and live with this commitment. Anyway, with Hamish setting up a branch of the law firm in Scotland, and Alistair's possible partnership with Adam, perhaps his life as he defined himself, above all, private investigator, would get back on track soon. Margaret was still talking away, so he tuned in again. What do you think about that idea for a wedding cake and the artist I met and the wedding invitations? She was smiling in anticipation, shining eyes open wide. Had she really changed so suddenly from a shy, serious lawyer to a bubbly bride-to-be? He smiled. All sounds great, darling. But he had no clue about what he just agreed to. Oh, well, on their wedding day, he would pretend not to be as surprised by the cake as the guests were. So there's Alistair starting to have a little bit of a doubt himself. But assuming they get married and go on a honeymoon, next place they're going to go is Shetland. So let's go to Shetland. There's the Stones of Stennis again. Now, you can't talk about Shetland without talking about an Shetland TV show, so I will refer to it now and again. The map on the left, some of the places are green because those are the islands that are served by the ro-ro ferries, which means roll on, roll off, literally. And if you've read any of Anne Cleeve's books or seen the shows, she does, I think, a fabulous job of working in the ferries. For example, on a tiny, well, you saw that earlier ferry I showed that was very small. And quite often in her books, she'll have a scene where Jimmy Perez is sort of saying, what do you think? Is the murderer still here? Or did they manage to leave the island? He said, well, let's go check with the ferry. They'll know. You know, was there a stranger on the ferry today? No. Okay, he's still on the island. And I think that's quite realistic from, you know, my experience there. So later on, I'm going to talk about the very north, the most northern green island you see there, which is Unst, but I'll get to that. And you may wonder why this group of Scottish islands is in the middle of the Norwegian Sea. I'll get to that. So, and if you have any hope of like avoiding any reference to fictional Shetland, this is the main ferry that comes up from Aberdeen, the car ferry, and it's actually sailing right by the Old Man of Foy up there. So if you were to take this ferry from Aberdeen, you do get spectacular scenery on the way up, and it comes into Stromness. But here they are, they're promoting 20 places to visit if you love the Shetland TV series. So a little bit of history, you can see there that Shetland is probably almost as close to Norway as it is to Scotland. And Orkney and Shetland officially became part of Scotland in the 1470s. Because they'd been offered as security for the dowry of a princess from Norway for marrying one of the Scottish kings. And Scotland ended up with them. So that's why they're Scottish, but they also don't feel very Scottish. Very. And people in Orkney, they say, because you can see the north coast of Scotland from Orkney, which is the lower group of islands, and they will say, oh, look, we can see Scotland. It's like, wait, this is part of Scotland. And this next picture, this historic Scotland sign, this is in Lerwick, which is the main city in Shetland. When I was there, we saw that people had defaced it to remove the historic Scotland language and the thistle because they don't want it to seem Scottish. So now, just like in Orkney, you can be driving around Shetland and passing Neolithic structures and ancient Stone Age structures right at the edge of the town. So this is one of these brocks that I mentioned. This is a diagram of what they originally would have looked like. Most of the ruins are now not even one floor high. They're
settled in themselves.
Yeah, well, just basically fell down. Yeah, there's one. You can sort of see in the picture. There's one called Musa Broth in Shetland. It's on an island. I haven't been to it, but it is the last remaining one where several stories are still standing, and you can go in it. Although I think huge numbers of birds live in it, so I don't know how pleasant it would be. But you can see from the diagram that they were built with a double wall and then stairs going around within the double wall. And some of the brocks that I visited, you can get a sense of that, even though it's just the ground floor. You can still like walk up a few steps between the stone walls. So,
was it insulation or just to segregate the stairwell?
I don't think anyone knows, truly. There's very little known about, you know, why they were built and how they were used. But this one, you can just go and walk around. It's very well maintained, and you can see it's basically in people's front yards. So you can go in, take some tea, enjoy the ambiance. And then, so this one is sort of available to walk in at any time. This much bigger one called Jarlsø, it's at the very, very south point of Shetland. And this one has a visitor center, and you can only go in, you know, by paying a fee. But it goes back 2,500, so 4,500 years. And it's been used almost continuously by successive populations of people. Now, Shetland also has some just spectacular scenery. And the place I really liked is called St. Ninian's Isle, which has a tombola, which is sort of a double-sided beach. And this is one of the, I think, best examples of it in Britain, if not Europe. So the picture on the left is looking from mainland Shetland over to St. Ninian's Isle, and then the second picture is standing on the island and looking back. And you can see almost every day we were there, it rained, it was gray, so the pictures aren't terribly spectacular. And then here's just a picture of the sign with a more bird's eye view, literally. And if you can see, just on the other side of the tombola, of the sand, there's, before I get to that, this was, if you've watched any of the Shetland series, this was actually used as a locale for drugs washing up. So if you can picture a scene where drugs were washing up onto the beach, it was filmed there. And so that chapel on the, it's okay, it's all right. Thank you. The chapel that you can see on the far side, that is famous because in 1958, a schoolboy found a treasure trove. I think he opened a wooden box, and no one really knows, you know, who had collected these. Were they hidden to be safe from raiders? Were they, who knows? Were they stolen? But you can see all these in the museum in Edinburgh if you go there. Yeah. But you know, who knows what else is still buried out there? You know, it's just sheep wandering around. If you went around with a metal detector, you know, what might you find? So now hopping forward in history again, I'd mentioned about World War II a couple of times. So Shetland played a major role helping Norway during the Second World War. And well, see, now I've lost my glass, so I can't really, I was going to read from, unless somebody wants to be a guest reader. Would you like to be a guest reader? And just read the forward? Is that going to,
During the German occupation of Norway, from 1940 to 1945, every Norwegian knew that small boats were constantly sailing from the Shetland Islands to Norway to land weapons and supplies and to rescue refugees. The Norwegians who stayed in Norway and struggled there against the invaders were fortified by this knowledge and gave the small boats the familiar name which is used for the title of this book, Take the Shetland Bus. Became a synonym in Norway for the escape when the danger was overwhelming. This record of the adventure of the Norwegian sailors who manned the boats is offered as a tribute from the English colony to Norwegian seamanship and as a humble memorial to those who lost their lives.
Thank you. So the book is called The Shetland Bus, which I would highly recommend. I ordered a copy through interlibrary loan. This is what it looks like. And this version, this copy actually comes from the Maine Maritime Academy. So, but it is available from the library. And like I say, I think it's worth reading. And Anne Cleves, again, made, I thought, very good use of this history in this book, Red Bones, if any of you have read this. And at the beginning, she actually acknowledges this book as, you know, a really good source for for background information. So, and please again. And so the memories of the Shetland bus, I'll just show you again that, you know, this is a memorial there in the town of Scalloway in Shetland. And you can see that this was in 2018. But, you know, fresh wreaths are there, fresh flags. And then in 1991, there was another commemorative plaque put up to mark where the slipway was, where boats would set out to go over to Norway. It's pretty amazing. And then in the Scalloway Museum, there's a lot of World War II history, I think with a focus on Norway, but it really keeps it alive. So, I mean, it's depressing, very depressing, but I think it's alive in a way you kind of don't experience it many places. And moving on to happier things, Shetland ponies. Jack asked me about Shetland ponies. I think this pony on the right is about the most cute thing. Isn't that just adorable? Well, yeah, the picture of me, that you can see me in the left side, I included that so you can get a sense of.
They're like large dogs.
They are like large dogs. And I mean, I'm sure those belong to someone, but, you know, they were quite happy just to, you know, have us visit and pet them. Yeah. It was very cold and windy, but they seemed fine. But that one on the right. And then in addition to seeing Shetland ponies everywhere, you see Shetland sheep everywhere. This one, this lamb was so cute that I had to do a little bit of research about it. And you'll love this. According to NASA, NASA, the North American Shetland Sheep Breeders Association, this particular marking is called a younglet with panda-like eyes. They're very cute. So if you were to research North American Shetland Sheep Breeders Association website, there's I don't know, 15 or 20 of these different breeds, and they all have what sound like Viking names to me, like Younglet and Sekhet and all sorts of things. So, but that is just so adorable. And then in addition to the cute wildlife, well, it's not really wildlife, the cute domestic life, the coast is spectacular. The picture on the right was from a birding boat trip. Good way to see the coast is to go out on a boat.
Do you imagine the weather?
I know. So, and then I'm going to finish by going up to the very most northern tip, which is Unst. And you need 2 ro-ro ferries to get there. You go from the mainland to Yell. There's about 50 theories on why it's called Yell. None of them have to do with talking loudly. And then you take another ferry onto Unst. I wrote on here much of the island is a nature reserve, actually just part of it, the very northern part's a nature reserve, but it's great birding. There are gannets all over the rocks. There are skuas that will fly up at you, you know, during breeding season. There's something called the Mucklefluga Lighthouse, which is the most northern lighthouse. And again, Anne Cleves, in one of her books, I think did a good job of having an elderly male character who had worked on the lighthouse. And he would be, I think, there for 3 weeks and then off for 3 weeks, and how difficult it was to adjust to life at home when he retired. But she really made, I think, good use of that lifestyle. And then there's the most northerly post office for people who still send postcards. You can get a puffin stamp. And then this is not related to the Shetland bus. This is a famous bus shelter that has its own website. And every year it's decorated differently by the local people. And it happened to be a space theme when we were there. That was 2018. And the purple structure on the left is actually a food cabinet. And I should have said I was in Shetland because I was on a Wilderness Scotland hiking trip. And the guide, they would take up to 8 people. The only people on it were me and my friend, Carlin. And we had our private guide, but it also meant that he had supplied the truck or the van with enough food for 8 people for a week. So, well, no, we donated it. We donated it to the food cabinet. You know, it was non-perishable. protein bars and things like that. So we kind of had fun doing that. So if do I have time for one final reading and then, yeah, okay, I'll just do.
What about Cowries? The wonderful little skies. No?
If we did see any, I didn't make a note of it. The Heelan Coos, yeah. They're huge. So I'll get back to possibly Margaret and Alistair. If they are on their honeymoon, then, and if it is at the beginning of May or late April, they're probably facing weather like this if they're out hiking on Unst. And that's the lighthouse I mentioned that used to be manned and now it's automatic, most northerly in Britain. And then in the left-hand photo, if you can sort of see the rocks out in the water, there's sort of a whitish tinge on some of them. Those are gannets. Those are gannets nesting or resting. So kind of imagine possibly Alistair and Margaret, or Alistair and somebody, or Margaret and somebody, and they've just framed a skua away. So here's just one more reading just to show how things are developing for them. Margaret and her mother have had an awkward conversation. It's the day before the wedding. Margaret's mother really prefers Henri and she can't stop talking about it. So alone again, so they've had breakfast. Now Margaret's in her room getting ready for the day, last day before she gets married. Alone again in her room, Margaret felt oddly unsettled, but attributed it to her mother's obvious preference for Henri. She could understand it in a way, leaving aside how Henri had broken off the romance to return to France. He was still a lovable guy, and no one could argue with his attractiveness and attentiveness. Today, her last day of being single, she would focus on enjoying the time with her parents and her Scottish cousin Jeannie and Hamish. They were taking her to a new restaurant at a nearby distillery, not for the whiskey, but because the food was being widely praised. Then later was her hen night. Katrina and Jeannie had organized it together, but hadn't given Margaret any hint of where they would go. Now, just as a side, Margaret tends to dress kind of either frumpy or getting ready to go beachcombing. So her friends have made her buy some new clothes for the events around the wedding. An hour later, wearing a new knee-length natural silk dress with matching jacket, shoulder purse, and heels, Margaret locked her hotel room door and headed down the stairs to the lobby. She had a sudden flash of memory back to Hamish's Christmas party, which anyone who's read Margaret's Mentor will remember, I hope, which her mother had annoyingly mentioned. Then she'd worn a dress more suited to a teenager and high-heeled sandals as she descended the stairs at Hamish's house. Just as now, she'd heard Henri's enchanting voice drifting up. She stopped partway down the stairs. Henri? She was supposed to be meeting her parents and Hamish in the lobby. But as she reached the bottom step, there he was, dressed to kill as usual. Her heart did an involuntary flip-flop. Henri stepped forward and took her hand to guide her to the rest of the waiting group. With a nervous glance at Hamish, Margaret's father, Oliver, watched to see how this would play out, but he wasn't going to get involved. Margaret's mother looked at Margaret, her eyes pleading. Poor Henri was alone here, waiting for the hotel restaurant to open. And we couldn't let him eat lunch by himself, could we? Yeah. Chérie, I hope you do not mind. Henri smiled at Margaret. She had her eyes narrowed, shooting mental daggers at her mother. Of course she minded, but she felt she had no choice. She'd have to make sure not to sit next to Henri at lunch, or her resistance might just start weakening. So she gets into the car, sitting next to Henri. Suddenly, time slipped, and she felt the cocoon of familiarity asserting itself as she sat too close to Henri in the back seat, with Jilly, her mother, on Henri's other side, and Oliver in the front with Hamish. Another jolt of memory from earlier that summer, when she'd had an eerie, sickening sense that Alistair was a complete stranger to her. Was her mother right that Alistair was just in it for the security to avoid being lonely? Maybe this little bubble was where she belonged after all, with Henri, with her parents' approval of the handsome Frenchman, and with her boss Hamish, who'd nurtured her career and helped her personally for almost 2 years now. Should she really embark on a life far from all that safety, that sense of home? She shivered for a moment, imagining the years and the decades rolling out, alone with Alistair in that cottage, growing distant from all the people that she held dear. Would he be off on work assignments all the time, leaving her on her own with children, worrying at night for his safety, and her mother 3,000 miles away? She shook her head to try and dispel the sense that she was making an existential mistake by getting married the next day. Oh, well, she thought to herself, we are going to a distillery for lunch. 2 hours to get through with Henri, 3 tops. She'd just start her hen night early, very early. So do they get married? Who knows? So, but after all the walking.
Is it possible that her mother sounds just like my mother?
Shetland cake fridges. I unfortunately did not know about these when I was in Shetland. I learned about them from the Shetland series, but they are a thing. Yeah, they're honor. Yeah, and I think so. That bottom, the right-hand photo I pulled up from the internet. I think that's a scene from one of the Shetland episodes, and I think that might be Jimmy Perez's father. Does anyone remember that he kind of went walkabout and yeah, does that sound familiar? And someone found him and called Jimmy. He was sort of gorging himself at a cake fridge. So, and I didn't talk about birds much, but for anyone who likes puffins, you know, around this area, MDI, you need to get on a boat to go out to an island to see a puffin. In Orkney and Shetland, once you're there, I know you're on an island, but once you're there, you can walk to see the puffins. So these are just some of the adorable puffins that you can get very close to. So thank you all so much. And thank you to the Zoom audience. Of course, yes.
Are you a citizen of the United States or of Scotland?
I was born in Scotland. I'm a British citizen, and I'm proud to say that after having a green card for 55 years, I think, no more, 59 years, I became a citizen September 2022. Thank you. So dual, yeah.
Do you have a spouse and children? No.
Just go back and forth whenever I want.
That's a great position to be in.
To anybody.
It could. I mean, like, yeah, no. I used that as the cover, but it was more because it was Orkney. Yeah. No, it's definitely worth visiting.
Yeah, a question from the online folks. Where do you stay along the St. Magnus Lane?
You would have to stay in either Stromness or Kirkwall and just do day trips out. I don't think it's set up so that there's going to be a convenient place to stay at different parts of the route because it's so remote. So you could either coordinate to have someone drop you off and pick you up, or there is a bus system. And so if you timed it right, you'd be able to get dropped off at the beginning of the walk with the bus and then get a different bus back to your hotel or B&B at the end of the day. Yeah.
You get a shell as well when you walk to Compostela. But yeah, shell, that's why you better the thoughts or the remorse of whomever they are. It was very really very traditional symbol.
I'd heard that you could do that, but I believe that the St. Magnus Way is quite recent. You know, I don't think it goes back hundreds of years. It's more, yeah, but I think it only became a thing relatively, quite recently. Yeah.
In the picture regarding, I guess, you talk about so where tell us
figuring this out?
Not much, no, the pics, yeah, there's this, I didn't pass this around because I didn't really talk about it, but this tidal island that I had the picture off at the very beginning, it's called, and that's how I got my name for the first trilogy, The Brow of Bercy, which is a tidal island. And on this one island, you can stand in one place and see, you know, a church, a Pictish standing stone with the Pictish carvings, a Viking settlement, a Stevenson lighthouse, and puffins. So you can, and I think you can find a Cowrie if you look. But yeah, it's the, actually I was disappointed to discover that the Pictish standing stone there is a replica on the real ones in the museum in Edinburgh, but I guess it, you know, it's going to get protected that way. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Did the Romans ever get that far?
I don't think so. I think there's, is it called the Antonine Wall? There's a wall, there's Hadrian's Wall that everybody knows about, but further north, there's something called the Antonine Wall. I believe that that's the furthest north they got. Not only, I think they got all the way up to, you know, like Orkney, Shetland. I may be wrong, but in the several times that I've been there, I don't remember coming across any particular Roman history. If there's anything significant, I would have put it in, but nothing jumped out at me.
I'm going to wrap this up. I'm Charles Daniel. I'm on the board here, and we thank you all for coming and supporting the library. We thank Jane for bringing her creativity, and our curiosity is piqued for the next trilogy you'll be working on. We'll hope.
Actually, yeah, the next book is underway.
The next book is underway. You can't get away with that, so we're gonna hold you to it.
And if you're interested, it's going to get into Scottish nationalism.
Oh, Scottish nationalism. So Jane has given you a lot of things to look up, a lot of resources to search out. And the librarians in this library are just eager as all get out to find these books for you from all over, and the wonderful magic of interlibrary loan. If you haven't, let's see, is it too late? Not yet. If you haven't finished your taxes, be sure to do the library tax check off and send some extra dollars or two off the top to main libraries. That's what provides our interlibrary loan service and other resources that you get free here at the library, this library. Take time, not tonight, but come back and see the Women's History Project show while it's still up. Lots of engaging things there. Another demonstration of the creative community in which we live. It's astonishing what is revealed when we open an invitation up and people come from all over and bring the stories of their lives and their life experiences the way Jane has with her books. If you're not on the library's email list, stop at the circulation desk and get your name so you don't miss the next great program that's going to be here. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for supporting the library. We love having you in the living room of Southwest Harbor whenever you can get here. And once again, let's just thank Jane.
Thank you.